Yeah, thanks everyone. It's everyone who survived through the previous presentation. It was quite heavy and intense. Thanks for staying. I think my presentation would be a bit lighter than that one, but I hope still interesting. So my name is Andrei Kusa, I'm CEO and co-founder at Let's Data. What we are doing, we are basically scanning media and social media for early signals of information operations and impersonations and other types of narrative attacks. And we view it as a precursors and as a key components of the cyber kill chain at the moment. And we started initially in the government/defense space back in Ukraine 5 years ago. But in last years, we've been working also in the private sector quite a lot. And today, I decided to focus on the practical aspects. So I brought you a few cases of information operations and disinformation campaigns that are from the defense sector, that are from the typical government sector, like the elections, which later pivoted into the private sector. And then the third one is an attack on the company, which uses information operation as a warm-up. And all of the three information operations we found and disrupted last year. So later on, I wanted to just show you that they follow the same pattern. And basically that by looking into the narrative intelligence, you can understand that the cyber attack and other forms of fraud scams will follow if you know what to search for. So the first case brings from the defense sector. So last year, we started noticing a new type of a campaign. It was targeting the soldiers on the front lines. It started with originally 10 videos on TikToks, which basically what happened, the hostile state, they stole identity of the real individuals. They stole identity of the real soldiers. And then they generated videos allegedly from those soldiers. And they used those videos specifically to target the soldiers on the front line in the other regions and battalions, because they understand that there is some more or less second-tier connection. You're kind of aware of the person, but it's not yet the person you know very well. And they were basically distributing the video saying that we are under attack, we are overrun, we are being betrayed, you need to leave your positions and run. And the idea was that this video distribution was synchronized with the intensity of the shelling and the attack, so that when the attacks are more intense, you have more distribution of the video. There was this campaign at some points reached 2 million views on the TikToks. Luckily, we managed to collect and understand the infrastructure and contain this campaign. But what we've seen interesting cases that this campaign was later pivoted to Europe. What they did, they again started stealing the identities of the people who are in the military. But then instead of targeting the front lines, they were targeting the citizens, the second connection citizens in the countries, saying that the videos will now say, we are being prepared to be sent to the front lines in Ukraine and stuff like that. And the idea was that it would intensify around the election cycles. So if you have a local elections in the country, you can see a spike of those videos distributed through the TikTok. And this is a very clear example of how the information operations are now used in the defense and in the armed conflicts as a more or less one additional stage in doing the attack. The other case that I brought you is actually from Czech Republic. During the last elections, which happened in August last year, there have been dozens of campaigns that we've noticed, but one of the most interesting one is this one. The malign actors, they created over 48 hours, launched 210 cases of the Facebook ads. They bought on the marketplace the Facebook accounts that have access to the ad cabinet. And then the AI generated videos of the political candidates in the handcuffs. And they launched the ads to distribute those videos to the wider audience. And later on, those ads would lead you to the replicas of the websites like BBC, The Telegraph, Znamy Pravdy, basically like reputable websites. But in reality, those are replicas, which are geo-clocked, so you can access them only from Czech Republic. And those websites would be filled with the AI-generated content on the alleged arrest stories. And it was deployed prior to the election to impact the electoral process. But this campaign was actually contained and disrupted. But what's interesting is that here, someone got an order from, let's say, a hostile state to attack an election. They run the campaign, And then next month, we have a déjà vu effect because we see the same campaign again. But now it's not targeting the election. Now it's targeting the banking sector. So what happened is that instead of, they used the same playbook, and over 30 days, they launched 770 paid ads, but now targeting clients of the major banks, BNP, Santander, BBVA, and many of the others, HSBC. And they used identities of the political figures as well as the TV stars who would be in the ads promoting, sharing the stories how they make money on the investment. And this investment would be mostly in the crypto. Then again, you would have replicas of the reputable websites like FT, BBC, and many of the others, on which there will be long stories about how they make investment on basically how they invest and how they make profits. And then in those websites, there will be an app name mentioned and the link to the app. Initially, the campaign aimed at harvesting the credentials of the users of the banking systems, so they wanted you to integrate your banking system, but it didn't fly well, so they pivoted, and the next stage was doing the deposit scams. So instead of you basically like linking your bank, you would just deposit money. They will transfer them to the single-use accounts and money mule accounts. They will take the profits, and later on, you would not be able to withdraw the money anymore. And this campaign was much larger. It right away targeted multiple countries. It was Czech Republic, Poland, UK, Germany, and a few of the other countries. But it used the same infrastructure. And when you look into the website registration data as well as the code snippets behind the website, you see exactly the same Russian code, language fragments, and comments, showing that those two campaigns are actually run by the same organization, which previously got a tender from the government to disrupt the election and later searched for additional revenue streams and started targeting clients of the major banks, which eventually led to them losing to their customers losing the money. And the third case is a purely much more cyber-related type of a campaign. During the last year, there was launch of the OpenAI Sora model for the video generation. And during the time of the launch, the small organization in Filipino called Matbao Corporation, they are like a known threat actor in our space. They bought 31 Facebook accounts, launched 53 Facebook posts, and they created pixel-perfect replicas of the Sora website for the generation of the video. And then the idea was very simple, is that they've been targeting employees of different companies, trying the employees to use their Sora website. And then once the employee used the website, they will get the video downloaded, and with the video, they will download the malware and install the malware instead of the video on their devices. And what's interesting is that at the point at which we've seen this campaign, neither the malware has been yet known to the databases like VirusTotal and the others, nor the websites has been known in any registers. But we already can see that there is an attempt and a coordinated spread of this campaign. And later on, this campaign was contained very fast. So in total, it took less than 48 hours to contain the campaign fully. But it showed that the brand of the reputable brand can be misused to target the employees. And basically, when you think about those campaigns, what complicates them is that you cannot rely on the keywords for the detection because they either avoid mentioning the company or they misspell the company, so they avoid the keyword matching. They use tons of the AI-generated content, so they don't rely on the human-generated slow content. They use video content a lot because most of the platforms don't ingest very well the intelligence from the video content. You cannot identify that this is a campaign from a single publication. You need to see that there is a pattern in what they are doing and what they are following. And usually that means you need to have cross-platform analysis. So it's not only the Facebook that you need to see, or not only the email that you need to monitor, but also the ads and the TikToks and many of the other things. Then they use geoclocking of the websites you cannot access from outside, so the monitoring becomes a bit more difficult. They run it multi-platform right away, and then if they are not disrupted at the first attack, they will reuse the infrastructure, like was the case with these scams. The exact same infrastructure that wasn't impacted and wasn't taken down during the election time actually was later on reused for the attack on for the crypto scam. And then when it was not taken down at the first wave of this crypto scam, it was reused for the second wave of the crypto scam. But then when you look into this, all of those cases, they all follow the same pattern. And if you understand the pattern, you can understand what to do in terms of the response. Because the first part is always infrastructure build. They don't just create those accounts overnight and launch the attack. The reality is majority of the accounts are bought on the black market. They already have some history. And they create domains, they create the landing pages. And that usually happens weeks to months before the attack itself. Then there is a persona development. When there is an impersonation campaign against the company, no one creates a page that has the name of the company or the CEO, because that's immediately being detected by the platforms. Instead, what's happening, you are buying an account that existed for some time and slowly adjust one thing at a time so that it starts to impersonate. So if you track changes in the names of the account and at some point they start to resemble, that's the time in which you can catch it. Then later on, it goes to the next stage when you have the content fabrication. At this stage, you don't have yet the attack itself. Usually, they are doing A/B testing of various models and messages. So they would use, for example, in the cases of the check videos, they've been using multiple images at first. And they've been using multiple examples of the same one. And this usually takes a few days for them to do A/B testing of different messages and the content. And only then the attack would be launched. And then once they have tested, they do the narrative seeding. So basically at once, they start publishing the same story all over again, and amplification. Usually the idea is that there are a bunch of bot accounts that are created specifically for liking, engaging, sharing, and reposting this content, with the single clear idea that at some point this content should get into the organic, basically into the organic feeds, and it should be picked up by the real humans, because the key thing you can do in the response, you can take down the infrastructure that is being controlled, the impersonations, the bot accounts, but once it got out of the hands of the basically impersonated part, and it's in the organic feeds, it's very difficult for you to take it down because the platforms wouldn't cooperate. So the idea is that to use all of those accounts and bots to basically get it outside of their controlled environment, and then finally it's the impact. So when it's viral, it's very hard for you to take it back. Then they usually achieve the impact, and then either they stop or later on they reuse the infrastructure for the next campaign. And the thing is that majority of the signals that the teams are historically seeing, they are happening on the phase 4 and 5. So when you already have the big messages coming in and you start seeing that in the social media dashboards, you start seeing that in the threat intel platforms that you use. But the reality is, if you know what are typical targets within your organization, you can start searching that at the phase 1 and 2. But for that, you need a certain set of steps, like a certain actionable response. And the first step starts by really just ingesting the streams of data from the media and social media into your threat intelligence system and starting to process them. And the things to look at the first stage is basically abnormal page creation velocity. So basically, if you have on average every week 3 or 4 pages that try to impersonate your C-levels, and suddenly you have 30, that's a clear signal that something is happening. The brand misuse, so it's important to have deployed multimodal monitoring of the images and image recognition to know that your brand has been misused, as well as executive name invariance, product name invariance, and the channels with illicit offers, because majority, if it's for the fraud, beforehand, before the attack, there will be a warm-up phase in which they will recruit the money mule accounts, they will be preparing for the attack, and if you know which channels on the dark web and Telegram to monitor, you could know that there is preparation of the infrastructure. And then once you have any signal, it's important to log it. I mean, in case of the companies that successfully fought back, it's important that they logged it into the CEM, assigned to the analyst queue, and basically do not dismiss those as false positives without the cross-platform check, because that might be a single TikTok video, but in reality, it can also be part of the campaign that is happening on the Telegram or Meta. And then once you have a single case, it's important to triage it across other platforms. So the key idea and the key question to ask, is it a single page or is it a coordinated cluster? So it's important to get information on the page creation dates. Are they synchronized? Are they share the same metadata? And are there any overlap with your existing phishing kits that are usually attacking you? And then it's important that you have a certain set of understanding what is severity scores, like what is urgent in your organization case, because every organization is very different in terms of the media coverage, as well as that the incidents are attacked with the pre-attack, pre-attack, or the disarm mapping. And if there is a high severity attack, then it's important that you tuned in as early as possible the fraud, legal, and the crisis communication team. Because the thing is that once at the stage 3, you start pulling the IOCs, so you start pulling the domains, the IP addresses, the certificates, checking against your existing tip entries, and finding more data to access the actors. And usually that's the point in which you can start filing the takedown requests. But the problem is that if you are too late with the takedown request and that thing already got out into the viral organic media feeds, you would not be able to take it down. You would need to issue a crisis communication plan that would actually be trying to warn your audience or pre-bank that feed as much as possible. And for that, you need to have a clear escalation plan towards the crisis communication team. And we noticed that only in around 70% of the cases, it's possible to solve the problem with the takedown. The 30% of the cases end up in eventually involving the communications team to actually mitigate the damage. And then basically, it's about containing and disrupting. So analyzing all of the active pages they engage with, open channels, making sure to check the ads and phishing forms, and estimating the exposure, as well as filing the takedowns, notifying the fraud and legal teams so they are aware of the attack that is happening. And then last thing that is usually ignored, and I find it one of the most important ones, is about the documenting and sharing. So if the campaign has been concluded and the attackers reached their aim, or you've managed to disrupt it, it's very important to reconstruct the full timeline of the activity and basically update your playbooks, because all of those campaigns, as you've seen, they follow the same pattern. And this pattern is not evolving every day. This pattern is evolving slowly. So basically, if you update your playbooks and share with your peers across the sticks bundles for this particular attack, they would be ready. And if you have this sharing mechanism, you would be ready as well. Because the thing is that in the banking sector, for example, where we actively work, majority of the attacks that are happening against a single bank, next day they are finding another bank in the region. So it's very rarely that one organization is only a target. It's a question of the sequence. And in terms of basically understanding the timeline of that, one important part is that there is a different head time that you can get. And identity fabrication happens usually weeks out, because they need a few weeks to develop and age the pages and make sure that the pages are credible and that they will not be taken down at the first ad. So basically, they would need to run some legit ads, and usually you have weeks. And if you know what to search for and what could be a target within your organization, then actually you have lots of head time to escalate. Then the narrative seeding is usually weeks, because they need to test different A/B tests. And then the activation of the remaining infrastructure, like fraud channels and the apps and the websites, as well as engagement of the bot accounts, usually happens days from the attack itself. And in the cases when the companies successfully and the governmental entities successfully protected themselves, usually there are a few teams involved. So on the side of the CTI team, they are responsible for ingesting the narrative intelligence feed into the tip, as well alongside the dark web and network feeds, and mapping the IOCs for the campaigns to existing threat actors, as well as using the taxonomy for the MITRE and the disarm frameworks. But then it's very rarely stays with the CTI team because majority of the things are getting to the other teams. So with the SOC team, it's usually filing the takedown requests and making sure that whatever intelligence reports you have on the platforms, they can be shared with the platform's trust and safety, and you have a partner for the takedown request. As well as with the fraud teams, they need to be aware of the particular fraud patterns that are seen so they can adjust their monitoring. And I think the very important component is about the CISO and the leadership. Historically, we noticed that many of the organizations still have a outdated perception of the threats that they are facing, because it's very important that the CISO and the leadership frame the narrative intelligence as a valid attack surface, instead of just keeping it as a PR issue and leaving that with the communications, as well as they include the pre-attack surface metrics in the reporting, how many of the incidents we had, how many of them escalated to anything like a breach, how many of them were part of the cyber attack versus how many of them were just purely IOs. And ideally, the teams usually that respond most successfully, they have a designated InfoOps response owner in the incident response, so that you can constantly update the incident response plans when it comes to the attacks like that. And that's, I think, the key things that I wanted to give you. The core idea is that nowadays, before the cyber attack, you would have a warm-up phase in which you would have certain narratives being spread about the privacy, the accounts will be created and they will be amplified. Then there will be an impact, there will be or will not be a cyber attack, and afterwards there will be basically additional phase in which there will be more of a scaling of this impact and making it look bigger than it was. And that's used as a part of both the cyber attacks and the fraud campaigns that the modern companies are facing. And it's important to have this intelligence and the response plan in place. And one of a few things that to leave you with that are coming, that we see very early signals of, that are not yet production ready, so to say, is that we've seen the first few signals last month of the agentic I/O campaigns, when you have an agent controlling and self-optimizing the targeting of the content in real time without evidence of having a real human operator. I think we are still years ahead. We are still years away from that, but that's something that is coming. The other thing is extreme micro-targeting. So it's not just by the geography or language that you are being targeted, but the thing is, as we've seen in those campaigns, usually there is lots of abundance of data in the media and social media about your connections in your network. So usually they are utilizing the second level connections, people you are aware of but not knowing very well, to target you as the campaigns. And that's happening on the LinkedIn, that's happening on the other social media platforms as well as AI-enabled engagement. So it's no longer the bots, and I think that's already part of the case. It's contextually aware conversational agents that persuade you, as well as the deepfake clusters. I don't think we've seen in the last 3 months cases of a single deepfake being launched. Usually they are launched now in clusters. So a few months ago, there was an attack on a bank, and they launched I think there was close to 800 deepfakes at once of the CEO, because then they flood the trust and safety, and it's very cheap to create those. Like that's you can have them for any cost. And the result of all of this is that the entry level to run information operations is very low. You can have right now you have the influence as a service organizations that for any budget can create you influence operation. So for 5,000, you can disrupt a medium and small company, and then there are campaigns that the budget of which is estimated in hundreds of millions. Like, for example, the campaign to disrupt elections in Moldova is estimated to be 200 million. And it was running across a year ahead of the elections. So as you can see, the entry level is very low. So you have both the campaigns that are cheap, but still produce abnormal results for those who run them, as well as you have state actors who still spend quite a lot there. I think that's about it. Thanks a lot for following through that. I'm leaving here my contacts on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.